On the 12th day of our silent war, Isin decided to make a spectacle out of his own birthday party by arriving hand in hand with a woman who exuded elegance, her every move dripping with the polish of high society. I stood just beyond the doorway, a quiet outsider to the scene, when I heard someone inside crack a joke that cut through the music and laughter like a blade. "Isin, are you seriously leaving Selena now? Wasn't it you who chased her like a dog for 6 whole years?" The room erupted with laughter, and then came his voice, rich with arrogance and mockery. "Girls like her love to dream." I simply spun a little story to let her feel what love could be. He chuckled, adding, "Nobody really wanted her." What kept me around was that mix of ridiculous pride and insecurity. It amused me. The sound of glasses clinking followed, toasts being made, laughter rising. I froze in place, clutching the carefully wrapped gift in my hand, the gift I had chosen for him after hours of second-guessing, the gift that now felt like a cruel joke played on myself. He was inside, carelessly using me as the butt of a story, and everyone else was in on it. I turned away without saying a word. Some things, like sand, slip through your fingers no matter how tightly you try to hold on. Better to let the wind take them. Later, he would ask me if I even had a heart. And I told him truthfully, no, I don't. In that private room, he held Lisa like she was his whole universe, brushing her hair behind her ear, looking at her as if the world outside didn't exist. I stood there, stunned, trying to process the ache that bloomed in my chest. This wasn't heartbreak. It was something colder, deeper disillusionment. With Isin, everything had always been about control. Every time we fought, he waited for me to come crawling back, as if I had no dignity left. And I always did. I let him step over every boundary. I pretended not to notice every time he disrespected me. He knew I would come to that party, gift in hand, just to smooth things over. That's why he brought someone else. That's why he made sure to humiliate me publicly. Inside, someone repeated the joke louder this time. "You're really dumping Selena? After 6 years?" Isin, exhaling smoke, his arm around Lisa, said, "Cinderella's love to dream. All I gave her was a taste of a fairy tale. She thought it was love. But honestly, I never wanted her. She thought she mattered." Lisa giggled and nudged him, asking, "What's so special about an old virgin anyway?" He smirked, blowing smoke into the air. "Nothing. She's too stiff. Let her stay like that forever. I don't care anymore." His words were knives wrapped in velvet, sharp and soft at the same time. My lungs refused to breathe for a moment, my heart thudding like a drum echoing in an empty hall. I turned and walked away, the sound of their laughter following me like a curse. Under the flickering lights of the city, I tossed his gift into a trash can on the sidewalk. Let it go, I told myself. Let it all go. On a crowded street, where faces pass like fleeting thoughts, who's someone's unrequited love and who's just a momentary distraction. I've never believed in love. Not really. My childhood taught me that love was loud fights, slammed doors, the sting of a slap. After the divorce, my father brought home woman after woman, each of them forced into the role of mom, whether I liked it or not. When I refused, he beat me until my bones ached. Eventually, he dumped me at my grandparents' house and vanished. But my grandparents hated my mother, and by extension, they hated me. My so-called grandfather tried to touch me once in a way no child should ever endure. I cried myself to sleep behind the house for years. No one ever treated me kindly. No one ever wanted me to be happy. That's why, when Isin started chasing me, I was cold. He confessed his feelings, and I rejected him flatly. But he didn't stop. He followed me for 6 years from high school through college. He'd say things like, "It's okay if you don't love me. I'll love you enough for both of us." I didn't believe him, not at first. But his persistence wore down my doubts. I thought, maybe someone really could love someone like me. And who wouldn't be tempted by 6 years of devotion? How many people get that kind of love even once in their life? So I gave him a chance. I let him in. I opened my heart, and within a week, He tried to take me to bed. I wasn't ready. I believed that kind of intimacy should wait until marriage. He didn't understand. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't care. When I refused, he grew distant. Cold. He started ignoring my messages. Sometimes days would pass before he said a single word to me. Slowly, I became the one chasing him. The balance shifted. I begged for his attention. I excused his cruelty. Every time I said no, he found a new way to punish me. Leaving me stranded in the rain, mocking me in front of his friends, treating me like an embarrassment. He'd send large money gifts to other girls during holidays, just to hurt me. And now Lisa, perfect Lisa, was the symbol of my defeat. He paraded her around, mocking my background, my scars, my caution. Every tear I cried seemed to fuel him. And when I broke down, he'd hold me and whisper, "Just give it to me. If you do, I'll love you forever." He wanted me to break completely. And sometimes I almost did. Sometimes I believed he was the only one who would ever love me. I'd stare at the ceiling and whisper, "Maybe I should just give in. What does it matter?" But then I'd see my younger self crying behind the house. I'd remember the fear, the loneliness, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't let him take the last part of me I had left. Tonight, I tried. I really did. I curled my hair. I wore the dress he once said made me look like a dream. I practiced smiling in the mirror, tried to believe that maybe we could start again. But he didn't even look at me. He tore me apart before I even stepped through the door. In the end, everything he said, everything he did, it was all just a game. And I had been the fool, dreaming it meant something real. Of all the nights she'd cried before, this one felt different, not because the pain was any sharper, but because, for once, she wasn't trying to hide it. Selena sat by the window long after the city's neon lights blurred into each other like streaks of melted dreams, long after the hum of traffic died down and silence took its throne. Her legs had gone numb, her hands cradled an empty soup bowl, but her heart was still fighting to stay whole. She let the emptiness stretch, not running from it like she used to, not rushing to fill it with false hope or Isen's empty promises. She thought back to every time she had laughed at one of his jokes even when it wasn't funny, every time she said it's okay when it wasn't, every time she accepted his half-efforts, mistaking crumbs for devotion. And suddenly, she wanted to scream not at him, but at herself. Because she had seen the red flags, all of them, and still tied them into a ribbon and wore them like a badge of love. Was it love? Or was it just a desperate need to be needed? She had no answers, just a mounting ache that twisted in her gut like something alive. A sharp knock at the door startled her. She tensed, glanced at the clock. Past midnight. Her mind raced. Was it Joel again? Or him? She rose cautiously, the floor cold under her feet. Another knock. Then silence. She opened the door slowly and found a small paper bag on the floor. No one in sight. Inside was another cup of milk tea and a tiny handwritten note. "Tomorrow will be better. Jay." She stared at the note for a long time, then at the drink. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. That simple act of someone remembering what she liked without asking for anything in return shook her more than all of Isen's grand gestures ever had. In another part of the city, Isen lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. His room was quiet, but his mind was roaring. Why didn't she respond? Why hadn't she come? He had crafted that party to hurt her, yes, but also to lure her. He wanted her to show up, to cry, to beg. That's what she always did. He didn't know how to handle her silence. It scared him, made him realize that perhaps she'd finally learned to live without him. And that was a reality he wasn't prepared for. Lisa's words earlier rang in his head. "You're still in love with her, aren't you?" He didn't reply, but in the pit of his stomach, he knew the answer. He had never stopped. But love had never been something he knew how to give. He only knew how to take, to dominate, to win. With Selena, he had played king. But now he realized had ruled over ruins. The empire he built was made of ash, and now the wind was blowing it all away. He picked up his phone again. The screen was empty. He typed a message, then deleted it, then typed again. Can I see you? But he didn't send it. Because deep down, he knew words were not enough anymore. Not for a woman who had given him her trust and gotten burned. Not for a girl who had survived years of silence, abuse, abandonment, and still managed to love someone with her whole heart. And what had he given in return? Pressure. Control. Games. A few streets away, Joel stood on his balcony, hands deep in his pockets, staring into the night. He wasn't thinking about Issen, not really. He was thinking about Selena's eyes, those eyes that had been dulled by pain, but still held a glimmer of fight. He had known her since college, seen her from a distance, always beside Issen, always quiet, always trying to be small. But tonight, seeing her crumpled on the sidewalk, clutching that ruined cake, he saw her differently. Not as Issen's girl, not as some fragile thing, but as someone who had endured and was still standing. And something in him stirred, something protective, something he didn't yet understand. He didn't know what role he was meant to play in her story, but he knew this. She didn't deserve to feel like she was nothing. And maybe, just maybe, it was time someone made sure she knew that. Back in her apartment, Selena lay curled under a blanket, holding the milk tea close to her chest. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel completely alone. The storm inside her hadn't passed, but there was a quiet now, a stillness that whispered maybe the worst was over. Her phone lit up. A new message from Issen. She stared at it. Her thumb hovered. She didn't open it. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight was hers. For sleep. For breathing. For healing. And the message could wait. Because for once, she wasn't chasing, wasn't waiting. For once, she was choosing herself. Selena didn't sleep that night. Her body rested unmoving beneath the blanket, but her mind spun in endless loops of words that cut deeper than any knife. She replayed that call, the tone of his voice shifting from pitiful to poisonous, from pleading to punishing, as if her refusal to open the door had flipped some hidden switch inside him. And maybe it had. Maybe it always had been like this, love only so long as she obeyed. The moment she defied him, he became someone else entirely. She lay staring at the ceiling, wondering how many times she had told herself she could fix this, that he loved her, that he just didn't know how to express it. But how many apologies could be made after words like those? How could she ever unhear them? No wonder your parents abandoned you. No wonder no one loves you. He had said those things with such precision, like he knew exactly where her old scars lived and aimed for them without mercy. And the worst part? For 1 second, just one, she almost believed him. But then something hardened inside her, something that refused to break again. When the morning light began creeping across the windowsill, she got up and made tea, her hands steady, her face calm. There were no tears left. She sipped in silence, then walked to the mirror. Her eyes looked hollow, but her jaw was set. She still had to go to work. She dressed simply, tied her hair back, and left the apartment without checking her phone. Across the city, Issen was already moving pieces like a petulant king punishing a subject for disobedience. Make her uncomfortable, he had said. And within hours it began. At the office, Selena's boss, who had always been cordial, suddenly turned cold. Tasks were doubled. Deadlines shortened. Her usual responsibilities were shuffled around, given to someone else without warning or explanation. Whispers followed her in the hallway, colleagues avoided eye contact, and even the HR officer, once a lunch partner, now barely acknowledged her. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. Selena didn't ask questions. She didn't complain. She took it all silently, stacking reports with her head down, filing spreadsheets with fingers that trembled only slightly. Let them come, she thought. Let them throw stones. She had nothing left to lose. But what she didn't know was that Joel had noticed. He passed by her desk, paused a moment longer than necessary, watching the way her shoulders curled inward, the way her lips stayed pressed together in a line. That wasn't the Selena he remembered. He didn't say anything right then, but he made a note of it. Later that evening, Selena stood in front of the photocopier when the machine jammed. She opened the tray, tried to fix it, and ended up with a nasty paper cut. It bled, bright and sharp. A tiny wound. Insignificant. And yet it broke her. She stared at the blood pooling on her finger, and suddenly everything came crashing back: the ruined cake, the insults, the sleepless night, the whispers, the loneliness. She dropped everything and walked out of the office. No one stopped her. She wandered without a destination, eventually finding herself back in the tiny coffee shop Joel had taken her to once.
She ordered nothing.
Just sat there, invisible, while people came and went, their laughter grating against her nerves like sandpaper. She didn't want to cry in public. She didn't want to be that girl again. But tears had a way of disobeying. One slipped down. Then another. And then Joel's voice. "I thought I might find you here." She looked up, startled. He was standing by her table, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. No words. No questions. Just presence. He sat down across from her, slid 1 cup toward her, and waited. She stared at it for a long time, then wrapped her fingers around it, letting the warmth seep into her skin. "He's making things hard for you, isn't he?" Joel said quietly. She didn't answer, but that was enough. He nodded, more to himself than to her. "You know, just because someone's been in your life a long time doesn't mean they deserve to stay." Her lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I used to think he loved me." "I think you wanted him to," Joel replied, honest and gentle. "There's a difference." She looked away. "Maybe I'm just unlovable." Joel shook his head. "Don't say that. You've just been trying to grow something beautiful in poisoned soil." For a moment, silence held them. Then Selena whispered, "I'm so tired, Joel." He reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. "Then rest. You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore." That night, Selena returned home and finally allowed herself to collapse, not from weakness, but release. And somewhere in the city, Isin stared at his phone, seeing her status still offline, unread messages piling up unanswered. He felt the edges of something unfamiliar: panic, maybe, or fear. For the first time, he realized she might be gone for real. And he couldn't stand it. He didn't want her to be happy without him. If he couldn't have her, she didn't deserve peace. He picked up the phone again.
"Do it.
Make sure she breaks." Selena didn't flinch as the whispers grew louder. Every step she took past her coworkers felt like a blade pressed against her skin, but she refused to bleed. The photos had already spread beyond the office, she knew it. It wouldn't take long for them to circulate online, for strangers to form opinions based on fabricated images and malicious intent. But she kept her chin up. Lisa had made her move with precision, targeting the exact wound she thought would break Selena for good. And maybe it would have if it had been the first time. But this wasn't the first time the world had tried to bury her in shame. It wasn't the first time someone tried to reduce her identity to whispers and disgrace. What Lisa didn't understand was that Selena had been crawling through darkness long before she ever met Isin. This was just another night without stars. She stared at the monitor in front of her, fingers poised above the keyboard. She had opened her email again, this time not to cry, but to fight. The message from earlier, the simple "you're welcome," had come from a familiar address, one she hadn't seen in years.
Ain.
The name itself was enough to stir memories: long buried, quiet moments in hospital hallways, warm words when she was drowning, the only person who ever saw her as a whole human being before she learned to wear a mask. She didn't know why he'd written, didn't know how he had found out, but somehow that single message gave her just enough strength to keep going. It reminded her that once, someone had believed in her when she didn't even believe in herself. She took a deep breath and typed. Not an excuse, not a defense, but truth. To whomever wishes to believe lies, believe them. I won't justify my life for people who only see what they want. If you think my worth begins and ends with rumors, you were never meant to understand me. She hit send. Not just to her colleagues, but to the entire company. Then she stood, gathered her things, and walked out, not because she was giving up, but because she had decided this place was too small for her silence. The elevator ride down felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, Joel was there, leaning casually against a pillar, as if waiting for something he couldn't name.
She didn't speak.
He didn't either. But when she passed him, he turned and walked beside her. Outside, the sky had turned heavy with gray clouds. Rain threatened, but didn't fall. She stopped on the sidewalk. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice quieter than the city around them. Joel shrugged. "Because you look like someone who shouldn't be alone right now." She let that hang in the air. "I've been alone my whole life." He looked at her, then not like Issen used to, not with ownership or expectation, but with understanding. "That doesn't mean you have to keep choosing it." Her eyes stung, but she blinked the tears away. "I don't know what to do anymore." "Then don't do anything," Joel said simply. "Come with me."
Breathe. Rest.
"The world will still be here tomorrow, but maybe you don't need to face it right now." Selena didn't answer. But when Joel opened the passenger door of his car, she got in. They didn't talk much on the way. Music played low, something instrumental, gentle, with no lyrics to fill the space between them. His apartment wasn't grand, but it was warm. Safe. He handed her a towel to dry her hair as the rain finally started outside. She sat on the couch, wrapping the towel around herself like armor. "You know," Joel said from the kitchen, "my mother always said you can't kill a tree by cutting its branches. You have to go for the roots." She turned to look at him. "You think Lisa's trying to cut me down?" "She's trying to dig up your roots," he said. "But she doesn't realize you've been replanting yourself for years. And that kind of resilience that scares people." Selena gave a soft, tired laugh. "It's exhausting." Joel handed her a warm cup of tea. "So be tired. But don't let them turn you into something you're not." She sipped slowly, the warmth spreading through her fingers. "Why are you being so nice to me?" He looked her in the eye. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for a story no one bothered to ask you about." That night, Selena slept in a place that didn't feel like punishment. The rain tapped gently against the windows as if the sky was trying to comfort her. When she woke the next morning, sunlight peeked through the curtains. She sat up slowly, realizing for the first time in days that she had slept without waking up in panic. Joel had left a note on the counter. "When to grab breakfast. Stay as long as you need." And beside it, a tiny potted plant. Something alive. Something green. Something that whispered, "You're still growing." Selena looked at it for a long time, then whispered back, "So, I am." He came into my life like an unexpected pause in a sentence that had been nothing but pain. I remember that day so clearly, though it had been years ago. It was raining, but the clouds weren't cruel, just soft and heavy, as if the sky itself were grieving with me. I had skipped class again, unable to bear another hour of whispers, of mocking stares and thrown papers. I sat alone behind the auditorium building, my uniform skirt damp from the concrete steps, my arms wrapped around my knees like a last defense. And then I heard his footsteps. He didn't speak at first. Just sat next to me in silence, close enough for me to feel his presence, far enough not to invade. After a few moments, he offered me an umbrella. "You'll get sick," he said, his voice awkward, unsure. I didn't take it. I didn't trust it. He didn't push. Instead, he sat beside me with his own uniform slowly soaking in the rain. That was the first moment I thought someone might actually see men at the rumors, not the lies, but me. Over time, he started showing up more, offering snacks during breaks, asking if I needed help with assignments, keeping the bullies away with a glare I couldn't understand. He was popular, admired, the kind of boy who had no reason to even know my name. And yet there he was, constant, patient, kind. Or so I thought. At first, I told myself it couldn't be real. People like him don't just care for people like me. But he persisted. And slowly, like a flower blooming in winter, I started to trust. I started to believe that maybe I wasn't dirty, maybe I wasn't broken beyond repair. We never dated back then. He never confessed. He never touched me. But he became the warmth in my frozen world. He gave me hope. And it was that hope that carried me through those final years of high school. I graduated. I moved away. I built a new life with bruised hands and a guarded heart. And then one day, years later, he appeared again, older, sharper, more charming than ever. He said he remembered me.
Said he had searched for me.
Said he couldn't stop thinking about me after I left. It felt like a miracle. The boy who once protected me had become the man who pursued me. How could I not fall for him? I thought fate had finally decided to be kind. I was wrong. What began as tenderness turned into control. His protectiveness became possessiveness. His patience turned into punishment. And I let it happen, blinded by memories of the boy he once was. I told myself he hadn't changed, that life had just hardened him like it had hardened me. But I was lying to myself. Isin hadn't saved me. He had simply waited until I was whole enough to be broken again. I stood there in front of the school, staring at that old plane tree, feeling the wind brush past me like the hands of a time I couldn't erase. Children laughed nearby. A girl with braided hair chased her friend across the sidewalk, her voice bright with joy. I envied her. I pitied her. I hoped her story would be different. I turned away from the gate, the weight of memories pressing on my shoulders. The street I once hated now felt eerily quiet, as if the ghosts of my past were watching me, waiting to see what I would do next. I didn't want to cry anymore. I was done letting the past dictate my worth. I walked slowly, without purpose, letting my feet carry me through alleys and streets I hadn't seen in years. And then, as if summoned by fate itself, I saw him.
Ain.
Standing in front of the convenience store near the train station. He was taller now, leaner, his hair messy like always, and in his hand was a familiar notebook, the same kind he used to carry during his hospital rotations. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he smiled, small, hesitant, real. Selena, he said, as if tasting the name on his tongue after years of silence. It's been a while.
I didn't know what to say.
So I nodded. It has. You look like you've been through hell, he added softly. I laughed, and to my surprise, it wasn't bitter. That's because I have. Still standing, though. Barely. That still counts. He offered me a bottle of water like he used to. I took it. Our fingers brushed. It was such a small gesture, but it reminded me of who I used to be, someone who believed in new beginnings. We didn't talk much after that. Just walked side by side for a while, like two ghosts revisiting the place they once haunted. When we parted ways, he said, "If you ever want to talk, really talk, I'll listen." And I believed him. Not because I was desperate, but because his eyes didn't lie. That night, I returned to the city with tired legs but a lighter heart. For the first time in a long while, I let myself believe that not everyone wanted to break me. Some people, even from the past, could still offer peace. And maybe, just maybe, I still had a future that wasn't shaped by pain. The silence after blocking him was deeper than any she had known, and for once, it didn't frighten her. It didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like relief. The alumni group was gone, the fake congratulations gone, the performative pity gone. No more messages pretending to root for a love story they knew nothing about, a story they had only ever watched from the surface. Selena leaned back in her seat, eyes tracing the blurred outline of the world outside her car window. The sky had shifted to that dusky blue before evening, and the city seemed to slow its breath, as if the day had tired of pretending to. She didn't know how long she sat there. Time had become something abstract, fluid, meaningless. Eventually, she started the car again and drove. No destination. Just movement. Her mind wandered, not to Isin, but to the small things that had held her together these past few days. Joel's quiet kindness. The sound of rain on glass. The plant he had left on the counter. The soup that warmed more than her stomach. She drove past places she didn't recognize and others she couldn't forget. At a red light, she found herself staring at a street vendor selling skewers, the smoke rising like incense. A young girl, maybe no older than 16, stood nearby, hunched against the wind, eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for something she wasn't sure existed. Selena saw herself in that girl, raw and unfinished, afraid but standing anyway. And for a fleeting moment, she felt something close to pride. Because she had made it through. Maybe not whole, but still here. Her phone vibrated again. Not from my son, he was gone now, but from Joel. A simple message. Come by if you want to talk. Or don't. I'll still be here. She stared at the words for a long time. She didn't reply, but she changed direction. Joel's apartment was quiet when she arrived. He didn't look surprised to see her. Just stepped aside to let her in. She sat on the couch. He brought her tea. They didn't speak for a while. Just existed in the same space, letting the weight of recent days melt into the warmth of the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse. I didn't think it would ever end. That part of my life. It felt like a curse. Joel nodded slowly. Some things feel eternal until the day they don't. She looked at him, eyes tired. How did you know? Because I've been cursed before too. He didn't elaborate.
She didn't ask.
They both understood that pain didn't need to be named to be felt. She stayed there that night not because she needed protection, but because she was learning what safety actually felt like. Joel didn't hover.
Didn't pry.
He simply made sure the room was warm, the bed was clean, and the door was always unlocked. And when she closed her eyes, there were no nightmares. Just quiet. In the morning, she woke to birdsong instead of sirens. Joel had already left for work, but had left her a note on the kitchen table. The past isn't your prison, Selena.
It's just the place you survived.
You don't owe anyone your story, but you do owe yourself peace. She read the note 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in her bag. She returned home and stood in front of the mirror. The woman who stared back wasn't healed, but she wasn't broken either. Her eyes were still sharp, her spine still straight. She changed into a simple outfit and opened her laptop. There were emails waiting, some from headhunters, some from former clients, a few even from people who had seen the chaos at her old office and wanted to offer support. She didn't reply to any of them right away. Instead, she opened a blank document and began to write not a resignation letter, not a complaint, but a story. Her story. Not for the world. Just for her. She wrote about the girl who grew up behind locked doors and whispered warnings. About the boy who came like sunlight and became a storm. About the woman who stood in a room full of wolves and didn't scream. She wrote until her fingers ached, until the sun dipped low again. Then she closed the laptop and breathed. She wasn't trying to rebuild what had been broken. She was building something new. That night, she went for a walk. No makeup. No armor. Just her. The wind tangled her hair. The city lights flickered like old memories. She passed by a bookstore still open and stepped inside. The clerk smiled at her. She smiled back.
Small. Honest.
It was a beginning. Not of a fairy tale. Not of revenge. But of a quiet, stubborn rebirth. And as she walked home under a sky full of stars, Selena realized she didn't need anyone to recognize her worth. She had already found it within herself. Selena didn't respond right away. Her fingers remained laced with Joel's, motionless, not pulling away, but not pulling closer either. Her breath was slow and shallow, as if any sudden movement would shatter whatever fragile balance they had. The bowl of noodles had gone cold, the steam now just a memory. She looked down at their joined hands, at the faint tremble in her own, and felt the tug-of-war raging quietly within her. Joel didn't pressure her. He sat there, calm, quiet, as though he understood the weight of what he was asking and had already accepted that she might walk away. But that was the thing, no one had ever offered her anything without expecting something in return. No one had ever said, "Use me," and meant it without cruelty. Joel's voice had been steady, his words direct. But his eyes held something else, something that made her uneasy because it was too kind, too steady, too real. She had lived too long in a world where kindness was just a setup for betrayal. "I can't be owned," she whispered. Joel nodded. "Then don't be. Just let me be the background." Let me be the safety net when you fall. That's all. She exhaled a shaky breath. You know this won't be a happy marriage. Then let's not call it a marriage. Call it an agreement. Call it a shield. Call it whatever you need it to be. And if one day I leave, then I'll hold the door open for you. His words landed with such gentle finality that something inside her cracked not from weakness, but from sheer exhaustion. Selena looked away, afraid that if she stared at him any longer, her walls would crumble entirely. Fine, she said quietly. I'll marry you, but don't expect love. I don't, Joel replied. Just trust. That's enough. They didn't say anything else that night. Joel walked her back to her car and didn't try to kiss her. He didn't even touch her. He simply opened the door and said, "Let me know when you're ready to go to the courthouse." And then he left. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost mundane. And that made it feel strangely safe. In the following days, everything moved faster than Selena expected. Joel had already prepared all the legal documents. The prenuptial agreement was airtight, clearly stating that she could leave any time and still walk away with half his assets. He insisted on registering the marriage through a private channel to avoid drawing attention. She hesitated to sign until the last moment. But when she did, her signature was firm. No trembling hand. No last-minute doubt. The courthouse clerk didn't ask questions. Just stamped the documents and handed them a copy. Joel slipped it into a folder and handed it to her. You're officially someone's wife now, he said with a crooked smile. Selena gave a humorless chuckle. Feels like a transaction. It is, but a fair one. That night, she didn't go back to her apartment. Joel gave her a key to his place. It was quiet, sunlit, and modest. No cameras, no staff, no prying eyes. For the first time in weeks, she slept without locking the door. He didn't sleep in the same bed. He didn't try to make it anything it wasn't. He was there when she needed conversation, and gone when she needed space. Slowly, her nightmares began to fade. The noise outside her old apartment stopped. Lisa's messages went unanswered. Issen's threats went straight to spam. One afternoon, she opened her inbox and saw a message from her former boss.
Short.
Formal. We regret the circumstances of your resignation. If interested, we'd like to discuss a freelance contract. She didn't reply. She didn't need to go back. She had survived without them. Meanwhile, Joel became a strange constant, a silent presence in the corners of her daily routine. He never demanded affection, but he always poured her coffee, always left a clean towel, always checked the lock on the front door twice before going to bed. Once, she asked him why he was being so careful. Because you've been broken too many times, he said simply, and I don't want to be the reason you break again. She didn't reply, but the words lingered. On the 13th day of their marriage, they sat in the living room watching a documentary. Nothing romantic. Just two people in the same space. At one point, Joel got up and fetched a blanket, then placed it over her legs without asking. Selena stared at the screen, unmoving. Then, without looking at him, she whispered, "You're nothing like him." Joel paused. Is that a good thing? It's terrifying. Joel didn't ask why. He just nodded. Later that night, she stood by the window, staring at the city lights. In her hand was a cup of tea, warm and fragrant.
She didn't know where this path was going.
She didn't know if Joel would become something more or simply remain the man who offered her shelter when the storm was too much. But she knew one thing. She had made a choice. Not out of desperation, not out of fear, but out of a stubborn will to survive. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing her in a silence that felt like a vacuum, too sudden, too clean. Selena leaned against the cold wood, her breath shaky, heart thundering in her chest like it wanted to burst out. On the other side, two men stood suspended in an emotional storm, one trying to reclaim what he had lost, the other fiercely protecting what he hadn't even dared to fully claim yet. Her legs gave out slowly, and she slid to the floor, hands covering her face. What just happened echoed in fragments Joel's fierce kiss, the pressure of his hand on her waist, the heat of his breath still lingering on her lips, and then the sudden invasion of Isen's voice, harsh, sharp, bleeding pain. She hadn't seen that look in his eyes since the first time he waited outside her school in the rain with nothing but a paper umbrella and eyes full of hope. That boy had vanished long ago, buried under layers of pride, control, and cruel possession. But just now, as he called her name, that same boy surfaced lost, raw, desperate, and it broke something in her. Not out of love, out of grief. Grief for what they could have been, if only they had met differently, lived differently, been different people. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to block out the sound of her thoughts. But even that failed. Every second passed like a drop of water in a cave, echoing and echoing. She didn't know if she wanted to cry or scream or sleep. Instead, she forced herself to stand. She walked to the window, cracked it open slightly, and listened. There were muffled sounds outside, dull thuds, strained voices, something slamming. She knew better than to look. If Joel needed her, he would knock. If he didn't, she would trust him to handle it. And if he still believed fists could fix what he had broken, then he hadn't changed at all. She walked back to the kitchen, picked up the groceries from the floor, and began to unpack them one by one. Tomatoes, eggs, green onions. Her hands moved with mechanical calm. When her fingers brushed a pack of tofu, she paused, remembering how Joel always teased her for hating it, and yet he kept buying it because taste can change with the right seasoning. Her lips twitched into the faintest smile. She placed the tofu in the fridge and moved on. 10 minutes later, there was a knock. She froze. One knock. Then two, gentler. "It's me," Joel's voice called out. She exhaled slowly and opened the door. His shirt was wrinkled, hair slightly disheveled, a small bruise already forming at the edge of his jaw. But his eyes were calm. "Isen?" she asked quietly. "Gone," Joel said. "He's not coming back. Not tonight." She stepped aside to let him in. He walked in, set the remaining grocery bags on the counter, and washed his hands. "Are you okay?" he asked, glancing at her through the mirror above the sink. She nodded, but her voice came out shaky. "You?"
Fine.
"He swings hard but with no aim." Joel chuckled lightly, wiping his hands. "You didn't need to fight," she whispered. He turned to her, drying his hands on a dish towel. "You didn't need to be scared either. I don't like seeing that in your eyes." They stood in the kitchen, close but not touching. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Joel said softly, "He's still in love with you. I know, but that doesn't mean he deserves you." "I know that too." She reached up and touched the bruise on his jaw. "Thank you." "You don't have to thank me. I'm your," he paused, then shrugged, "contractual husband." "Don't joke." "I'm not." He held her gaze. "But you can lean on me. Whenever you need." That night, they ate quietly. She made tomato egg stir-fry. He cooked noodles. They sat at the small dining table, not as lovers, not as strangers, but as something new, two people who had faced down a shadow together and come out breathing. Later, as she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, the bruise on Joel's jaw etched into her mind like a scar that didn't belong to her, but somehow hurt just the same. And for the first time, she thought, maybe this isn't just protection. Maybe Joel doesn't just want to shield her. Maybe he wants to stay. That terrified her more than Isen ever could. Because Joel didn't ask for her love. He waited for it. And Selena wasn't sure she still knew how to give it. But she wanted to learn. At midnight, she rose quietly, padded out to the living room. Joel was still awake, sitting on the couch with a blanket over his lap and a tablet in his hands. He looked up, surprised. "Can't sleep?" She shook her head. "Too much noise inside." He set the tablet down. "Wanna sit?"
She did.
She sat beside him, legs curled under her, both silent for a long while. Then she spoke, voice soft. "You saw all of me.
The mess. The shame. The past.
And you're still here." "Yes."
Why?"
Joel turned toward her slowly. Because you're not just your past. And because I think I've loved you longer than I realized. Her breath caught. Joel, don't answer.
Not now.
I don't expect anything from you. She looked down. I don't know how to love someone anymore. Then start with learning how to be loved. She looked up into his eyes. And for once, she didn't look away. Chapter 23. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the glow from the street lamp outside casting faint lines across the room. Joel had fallen asleep beside me, his chest rising and falling steadily, a quiet rhythm that should have been comforting, but it only made the silence heavier. His words about his mother haunted me. The pain he carried, the bitterness that clung to every syllable when he spoke about the past, it was like a mirror to my own scars. I turned my head and looked at him, his face soft in slumber despite the bruises. For a brief second, I allowed myself to believe this could be home. That this man, broken in his own way, could build a shelter with me out of our shattered pieces. But peace is never lasting in my world. The next morning, I received a letter in a red envelope, slipped under the door. There was no name, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Lisa. Inside was a photo of me and Joel at the courthouse, holding our marriage certificate. On the back, a single sentence was scrawled in uneven ink. If I can't have him, neither can you. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Joel picked up the letter from the table, without a word. His face darkened. She's back, he muttered. I nodded. We both knew Lisa wasn't the kind of person to give up. The past hadn't buried her, it had only made her more dangerous. That afternoon, while walking home from the pharmacy, I saw a man in a hoodie watching our building from across the street. When our eyes met, he didn't flinch. He just turned and walked away, slowly, deliberately. I stood there for a long moment, heart pounding, and then rushed home. Joel installed new locks, changed the security code, and installed a camera above the front door. Don't leave the building without me, he said. But part of me knew that whatever protection he could offer might not be enough. Lisa was like a ghost, always a step ahead, always ready to strike when we least expected. That night, I sat at the dining table and opened my old journal. I flipped through the pages, most of them filled with angry scrawls and tear stains from years past. I paused at one entry, a single sentence scribbled in large, shaky letters. Someday I will belong to no one, and I will still be enough. My fingers tightened around the pen. I added underneath, but right now, I belong to myself. The next morning, Joel drove me to the bookstore. He said I needed a change of scenery, something to distract me from the storm gathering over our heads. We wandered through the aisles, the smell of old pages and fresh coffee strangely comforting. I found a novel I used to love as a child and held it against my chest. Joel bought it without a word. On the way home, he asked, would you still have married me if none of this had happened? If Issen and Lisa didn't exist? I hesitated. Maybe not, I answered honestly. But I don't regret it now. He nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tightening just slightly. That night, he held me longer than usual. I could feel the tension in his arms, the unspoken fear in his silence. He didn't need to say, I already knew he was preparing for a storm. Days passed without incident, but unease hung over us like a cloud. Every shadow felt too long. Every sound too loud. One evening, Joel received a call from a blocked number. He answered with a short hello, and the voice on the other end sent ice through my veins. It was Lisa. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw Joel's expression turn to stone. When he hung up, he said only 2 words, she knows. I didn't need to ask what. She knew about the apartment, the building, the schedule, everything. And then he added, she wants to meet you. My stomach dropped. Absolutely not. He took my hands. If we run now, we'll keep running forever. She's not here to talk. She's here to destroy. Then what do we do? I whispered. His eyes met mine. We confront her.
Together.
I wasn't ready, but I nodded. Because sometimes, surviving isn't about being ready. It's about being braver than your fear. That winter, Joel brought home a stray cat. It was small, white, with one ear missing and scars on its tail. He crouched down at the entrance, the snow falling softly around him as the cat cautiously circled his feet. Selena opened the door and saw the two of them, one tall, broad-shouldered man in a black coat and the tiny cat looking up at him with wary eyes. Joel looked up too, smiling like a child who'd just found treasure. "Can we keep it?" he asked. Selena didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped aside and let both of them in. The warmth of the apartment greeted them, fogging up the windows and melting the snow from Joel's shoulders. The cat hesitated for a moment, then darted inside, disappearing behind the couch. They named him Ash, after the burnt tips of his fur. Selena hadn't thought much of it at first, but as days passed, she realized Joel wasn't just rescuing the cat. He was rescuing a part of himself. He cleaned its wounds, fed it by hand, whispered to it softly when it cried at night. Sometimes she would wake up and find Joel asleep on the couch, the cat curled up against his chest. One morning, Selena stood in the doorway and watched the two of them sleeping. Her eyes softened. There was something fragile about that scene, something real. Joel wasn't perfect. He carried too many shadows. But in that still moment, Selena knew she wasn't looking for perfection anymore. Just truth. Just warmth. Just someone who stayed. And Joel stayed. That winter, when the wind howled and frost traced silver veins across the windows, they built a routine. Joel always woke up first, made 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for her. He would leave hers on the nightstand, never waking her. Sometimes she drank it cold. Sometimes she didn't drink it at all. But the gesture stayed every single day. And Ash, once a ghost of an animal, now owned the house. He slept on their bed. He knocked over water glasses. He demanded cuddles. He became a reminder that even things broken by the world can learn to trust again. One night, as snow fell endlessly outside, Selena looked out the window and asked softly, "Do you still want revenge?" Joel didn't answer right away. He was washing dishes, the sleeves of his sweater rolled up to his elbows. Finally, he said, "I don't know. Some days I still feel like I'm drowning in what they did. But then I look at you, and I think maybe I can live for something else." Selena turned around, walked to him, and placed her hand over his chest. "Live for us, Joel. If we can't change the past, let's build something that wasn't written for us. Something new." He nodded, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "Then promise me you won't disappear again." "I won't," she replied. "But if one day I vanish, follow the sound of coffee being made in the morning. That'll be me." They both laughed quietly, as if afraid to wake the sleeping Kator, the fragile hope forming in the air between them. In a world full of betrayals, cold winters, and people who hurt without thinking, Selena and Joel chose to be each other's spring. They weren't healed. They weren't whole. But they were trying, and maybe that was enough. Maybe, in a life full of jagged edges, trying was already a kind of love. Chapter final. In this quiet life that finally settled around them, there were no fireworks, no grand declarations, only the sound of a kettle boiling, the clink of cutlery on ceramic, the warmth of sunlight pooling across the floor, and the gentle rhythm of 2 hearts learning to beat side by side. Selena didn't ask Joel about the past anymore. The past had already bruised them enough. She didn't care where his pain came from or why his eyes sometimes drifted into places she couldn't reach. What mattered was that he always returned. With groceries in one hand and a smile in the other, he returned. The city, once a place of chaos and noise, had become background music. They no longer measured happiness by what they could have, but by what they could keep. And what they kept was simple: each other, the cat that curled against their legs at night, and the memory of having once lost everything and survived. Sometimes, late at night, Selena would stare at the ceiling while Joel slept beside her, his breath soft and even. She would remember a younger version of herself, the girl who believed love had to be perfect, dazzling, painless. That girl was long gone. In her place stood a woman who had been bent but not broken, a woman who now knew that love was not about grand illusions but about choosing someone every day, even when the world made it hard. Joel still had his shadows.
So did she.
But in their shared silences, there was peace. In the mundane, they had found something extraordinary. One evening, while they sat watching the rain blur the city lights through the window, Joel whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Selena looked at him, her fingers brushing the back of his hand. "We didn't give up on each other." He leaned in and kissed her forehead, a gesture so quiet, so full of reverence, it said more than any apology ever could. Outside, the storm passed. And inside their little apartment, lit by the soft glow of a single lamp, two people who had once been broken learned to hold each other in the dark and call it home. There were no guarantees in this world. No rewinds. But there were mornings. There were sunrises. There was tea and toast and shared silence. And sometimes that was more than enough. The end. Sparkling Heart, a special thank you from Universe of Love and Anime to our beloved audience, Sparkling Heart. Thank you for always accompanying Universe of Love and Anime throughout the emotional journey of this story. Your presence and support are the greatest motivation for us to continue bringing deep, sincere, and heart-touching love stories. Each view, each comment, each share of yours is not just a number but a sympathetic heartbeat, a heart silently breathing in sync with the character. Thanks to you, Selena and Joel are no longer just names in the story, but have become a part of our common memory, where love overcomes hurt, where forgiveness is the only way to live on. We know that, in this fast-paced modern world, your time spent listening to a story is precious. Thank you for choosing to stay. And if this story makes you cry, makes you smile, or simply makes you feel like you're not alone, that's why Universe of Love and Anime exists. We appreciate every moment you spend with love, with emotions, and with yourself. Sparkles, if you find this story meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming touching stories. With all the love from the Universe of Love and Anime team. Dizzy Love Letter.